Welcome to The Explainer. We are jumping right in today, and I am absolutely thrilled because we're unpacking a paradigm shift that is literally going to change the very foundation of how organizations run. For the last couple of years, we've thought of artificial intelligence as a really smart tool, but right now, we're witnessing a massive evolution. AI is shifting from a passive tool sitting on your desktop to an active, autonomous participant in our daily workflows. We are moving into the era of agentic AI, and it is going to completely redraw the operating model of the modern enterprise. Okay, let's dive into this. Because this exact question captures the mindset shift every executive and leader needs to make right now. The old question was simply, where can AI save us some time? But when digital workers begin to actually plan, act, escalate, and collaborate alongside human beings, that old question, it becomes entirely obsolete. The new, much bigger question we have to ask is, how should we redesign work? Because how do we actually build our organizations when our software can start making choices? To answer that, here's our cognitive roadmap for today's explainer. We'll start with the agentic AI shift, move into the operating model gap, look at reshaping how we work, analyze the new risk landscape, and finally wrap it all up with designing the agentic organization, a structured journey from problem to concrete design. Let's go. Starting with Section 1, the agentic AI shift. Because to truly grasp this organizational earthquake, we first need to define the actual technology driving it. If we synthesize the definitions from MIT Sloan and the UK government's AI playbook, agentic AI refers to autonomous or semi-autonomous systems that understand a goal, reason about steps, use tools, and take actions with limited human intervention. The absolutely vital new abilities here are perceiving, reasoning, and acting. We aren't just talking about a machine learning model finding a pattern in a spreadsheet anymore. We're talking about software that is given an objective and actually figures out the steps required to achieve it on its own. Let's aggressively contrast this with what we're already used to. Generative AI is fundamentally passive, right? It creates text, images, or code based on a prompt. It just waits for you to tell it what to do. Agentic AI, on the other hand, is autonomous. It adapts to context and takes action. It does something operationally consequential. It might call a software tool, interact with another system, and then adapt its next move based on the result. It's not just talking, it's actually doing. So the crucial point is, we are shifting from managing a tool to managing a digital employee. Think about the profound difference there. If you buy a traditional software program, you need an IT administrator to install it and keep it updated. But if you introduce an agentic AI into your workflow, you essentially need a manager. It raises entirely new questions about delegation, supervision, and escalation that a traditional IT department just isn't built to handle. Which brings us perfectly to Section 2, the operating model gap. This is where we expose a pretty dangerous reality facing almost every major enterprise right now. What we have here are colliding timelines. Many large institutions are still struggling to absorb the last wave of technology. Take the NHS in the UK, for example. Their 10-year health plan is still heavily focused on completing basic analog to digital transformations, getting everyone onto electronic patient records and the NHS app. But right as they're trying to finish that basic digital operating model, this entirely new, complex, agentic operating model is basically arriving at their doorstep. And this brilliantly illustrates the exact problem we are facing. MIT Sloan and BCG describe the current landscape as having a tidal wave of adoption but a trickle of strategy. It is such a perfect summary. Organizations are experimenting with AI inside their existing workflows, just kind of layering it onto legacy systems, but very few are stepping back to ask if those workflows even make sense anymore. They're adopting the tech, but completely missing the strategic organizational redesign. That leads us right into Section 3, reshaping how we work. Let's look at the structural implications of throwing autonomous digital actors into the workforce mix. There are 4 massive impacts we need to map out here. 1. Decision rights. What is an AI agent allowed to decide, recommend, or execute, and what must it never do? 2. Workforce composition. We're looking at hybrid teams of humans and agents. 3. Governance. This isn't your standard annual review anymore. It requires continuous, embedded governance across the lifecycle, under frameworks like NIST. And 4, service delivery. We're moving from optimizing organizational handoffs to focusing entirely on end-to-end outcomes. Let's ground this theory in reality for a second. Consider the deployment of AI triage tools in the NHS app. Instead of a patient navigating a maze of organizational cues and handoffs, going from a receptionist to a nurse to a doctor across different disconnected departments, an agentic AI can dynamically interpret the context and route the patient directly to the right care setting. It completely reshapes the service delivery to be proactive and focused on the end-to-end patient journey, rather than rigid organizational boundaries. But of course, with this kind of power comes Section 4, the new risk landscape. When we start delegating real-world actions to machines, particularly in critical sectors, the stakes just absolutely skyrocket. Now, what's really interesting about this is how it highlights industry professionals actively grappling with these exact issues. Who's accountable when it acts outside what we expected, and how fast do we find out? Once an AI moves from just advising a human to actually taking action, the risk architecture fundamentally changes. It's no longer just a question of, well, is this accurate? It becomes a profound question of accountability and control. And there's a hidden workforce risk here too, the hollowing out of jobs. The immediate risk isn't necessarily mass unemployment. Actually, it's the displacement of entry-level and coordination roles. And think about it. These are the exact jobs that traditionally provide the pathways for human skill development. If an AI agent takes over all the junior coordination tasks, how do your human employees learn the ropes? Without deliberate redesign, organizations might accidentally strip themselves of their future talent pipelines in the name of short-term efficiency. So, how do we fix this? That brings us to our final section, designing the agentic organization. We need a clear, actionable blueprint to resolve this tension and redesign our structures safely. Let's move to and see how this builds into a practical 5-step procedural checklist. First, outcome-led design. Start with public value, not just the technology. Second, segment work. Figure out exactly what must be human-led versus AI-led. Third, redesign journeys. Don't just automate isolated tasks. Reimagine the entire end-to-end process. Fourth, define rights. Explicitly state the boundaries and escalation paths for every AI agent. And fifth, establish federated governance. I want to pause on that last point because it is so incredibly vital. Federated governance means central teams establish the strict safety standards and guardrails, but local teams are empowered to actually innovate within those boundaries. Why is this essential? Because if you don't do this, you get one of two disasters. Either well-meaning local teams deploy autonomous tools secretly, creating highly dangerous shadow AI, or central management completely stifles innovation with over-centralization. Federated governance is really the only way to scale this safely. Which brings us to our final thought for this explainer. I want you to take this final provocative question and honestly ask it at your next leadership meeting. Are you deploying new technology or redesigning how work gets done? Because Agentic AI is not just another IT upgrade. It's a fundamental catalyst for rethinking how decisions are made and how value is delivered. The organizations that win won't be the ones with the most AI. They're going to be the ones that redesign their operating models to truly unleash it. Thank you so much for joining me to explore this incredible topic today. Keep asking the big questions, and I'll see you next time.